Welcome back to Raised by Giants live discussion. Good to see everyone. Welcome everyone in the chat and any channel members and or moderators out there. And to anyone that's listening to the replay, thanks for joining us. And if you're listening to audio only, welcome. And if you're watching, be sure to follow the show on audio only platforms. It's because it's also a podcast. As a backup, you can set it to where the shows automatically download upon release on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, so you'll never miss a show. And also, we are a viewer supported show. We don't have any sponsorships, advertising, or affiliate programs. It's just me. I'm the only one that makes this show possible. I book all the guests, I make all the content, I make all the short videos, and I don't use any other third party people to do it. And I just keep trucking along for you guys, and I really appreciate your help and support. PayPal and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description and are a great way to help support the show monthly. And really, the easiest way is just to send in super chats. That way, I can give you a shout out as we are live. So, show some love and support for the channel and send in some super chats during the show. Channel memberships are also available and are a great way to help support the show. And by becoming a channel member, you get access to bonus episodes as a token of your support. Also, watch my latest documentary, A Clockwork Shining, on Amazon Prime if you haven't already. And if you don't like Amazon, it's also on Vimeo. The links are in the description. So, with that down, our guest today is a podcaster, investigator, exposing politics, true crime, history, conspiracies, religion, and cults. Here to talk to us about Catcher in the Rye, William Ramsey. Welcome to the show. How's it going, my friend?
I'm well. Thanks for inviting me. It's good to be with you.
Yeah, since it's your first time on the channel, give the audience a little bit of background on you and how you delve so deep into all these topics, because you cover so much stuff, dude. It's really incredible, especially the true crime stuff and the smiley face killer. So, what got you down this rabbit hole of investigating all this stuff?
I think it was coming from the mainstream media. I was just sick of watching the mainstream media and doing superficial takes on certain things. And I was never thought I'd be a journalist or a book writer, but I was actually doing a lot of my own research without a podcast or anything. Like I was really a researcher into 9/11. I didn't never publish any of my findings. I kind of did in my first book, Prophet of Evil, but I was always kind of doing it. And then I kind of morphed into it. I was writing books and I made some documentaries, and then I worked for Ed Opperman, the Opperman Report. Then I started being a host, and then COVID happened, and I kind of turned this into a full-time job. So I've got, I think, over 1,300 episodes now on my podcast, 5 books and 5 documentaries, all on my that you can find on my Patreon. So that's kind of like a short summation.
Oh, I didn't realize that you also made documentaries. What are they on, the true crime stuff as well?
Yeah, I have 2 based on my book. So I have one called Prophet of Evil. I have another one called Children of the Beast. I did one called Occult Hollywood. And then I have 2 documentaries about the smiley face killing phenomenon, which is young men disappearing out of bars or urban areas later to be found in water, often way past the time of when they should have been found. Some are like found magically appear 40 days later in really good shape. Like, so it's a really dark topic. It's still kind of happening today. They just found one in Oxford, another victim. So, yeah, so those are my 5 documentaries.
That's really interesting. I'll have to definitely check those out when I get a
Well,
chance.
they weren't up because Amazon wouldn't let me put them up on Amazon. I think one's on Amazon, but they're like, no, you can't. I don't even know why. So I had to kind of have. They were on Vimeo, and then I just moved them to my Patreon.
Yeah, Vimeo is a really good platform because Amazon doesn't really distribute it like worldwide. I think Clockwork Shiny came out in the UK and in the United States, but everywhere else, like in Canada and other places. So we just dropped it up on Vimeo. Why do you think that there's like such a big fascination with true crime? And we're going to get into the Catcher in the Rye stuff here. I just want to kind of give the audience a little easier into you as a person and get a little bit of your background. Why do you think that people are so interested in true crime? Because it's really hit a peak. It's like Netflix is doing all these documentaries on true crime, Hulu's doing them, and Peacock's doing them. It seems like this really heavy trend right now that a lot of people are interested in true crime. What do you think that mechanism behind that is?
I think it's the number one genre, and I think people get kind of a thrill from it. So they kind of hear these dark stories, and that one on Jeffrey Dahmer had 1 billion downloads on Netflix alone. Like, it's incredible numbers. like global numbers are off the chart. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I think people, maybe some of these topics haven't been discussed in detail, and so people are going over them again. But I know they're coming out with a chaos one on the chaos book with Errol Morris is directing it, the one by Tim O'Neill. That's coming out in March, so that'll be interesting. But I think it's just the public appetite for it. It's kind of like I said, it's kind of like people get a dark thrill out of it. It's also kind of becomes kind of like these serial killers. They drift into kind of a celebrity kind of realm in some ways. Like people know they're serial killers and things like that. So I think there's something about it. Like I think it's the interest in watching things like theater and watching movies about criminals and things like that is that people can see it but not be part of it too, I think.
That makes a lot of sense. And it seems like in the 60s and into the 70s and even part of the 80s, it was like nothing but serial killers. Like that was what was pushed out front in the consciousness of like the media. And then that kind of like took a back seat. You don't really hear too much about modern day serial killers, though you just brought up the smiley face killers, and that is supposedly still happening. But you don't really hear about like modern day serial killers anymore. It kind of shifted focus to like the external enemy, and you just talked about 9/11 and how that shifted the focus from an internal enemy to an external enemy and terrorism. And then it was serial killers, then domestic terrorism, and then outside threat, foreign terrorism, and then it went back to domestic terrorism. It's like this shifting of like all over the place.
Yeah, no, it's true. There was definitely, I think, a scientifically analyzed spike in serial killings in the 70s and 80s, and then a drop off, at least in the recording ones. And I don't think scientists know why that happened. I think some people know, like maybe Dave McGowan, that these
Yeah.
people all had some kind of weird military connection or background and may have led them to extreme acts of violence. So the 60s and 70s were really violent. They were really violent. I mean, we live in a violent world, and there's still violence that takes place, but there definitely was a spike of these serial killers around that time. Maybe it was the Vietnam War. A lot of those guys had connections to the Vietnam War, and then they came back and just kept killing and stuff. But yeah.
Do you think that this is like the serial killer phenomenon was kind of only isolated to the United States? Because you don't really hear too many like other I'm sure you know of some, but they're kind of far and few between of serial killers in other countries. It seems like it's kind of like the UFO phenomenon, like the hub of the UFO phenomenon is happening in the United States. Like
I think
really
you're right.
doesn't happen anywhere else.
I think there's serial killers like the Yorkshire Ripper, and there's stories out of France, and there's serial killers there and Italy, but they're not certainly not reported as much in the States. But I think the States is kind of the worldwide winner in serial killings. So yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we live in a violent country. Who are we kidding? I mean, the real reality out there is all kinds of tension and angry people and racism and things like that. So it shouldn't be that surprising.
Yeah, it's just so interesting when you kind of take a step back from the things we've been enveloped in the United States, and then you kind of step back to it, and you're like, how do other countries, respond to this stuff? Like, are cryptids and UFOs and like, I know it's a completely different topic, but it's around the same realm. Like, do they obsess about that stuff in like other country? Like, I don't know. I think a lot of things are just 100% isolated to the United States, and it's the things that like we're interested in, and the rest of the world really doesn't give a shit about any of it. It's so weird.
I've found that the UK is interested in these parapolitical subjects. I think Germany does too. I've talked to a couple of researchers in Germany who were interested in kind of MK Ultra mind control and secret history. So I think it just may not reach from outside into the US. I think it's out there, but yeah, it is interesting how the US is kind of a nexus point.
So let's get into this Catcher in the Rye stuff, because you watched several parts of the latest documentary, and it's heavily focused on Catcher in the Rye, and Joe Atwell came in and gave his explanation and his theories as to what he believes Catcher in the Rye was at around an hour into the documentary. I'm not sure if you got that far with it, but
I did. That's
What?
kind of what triggered my research into Catcher in the Rye. Actually, was kind of.
Oh, really?
Well, I had done a show in 2024. It was in April, and it was for a program I was working on. It's called the D-Hypno program, which is kind of like it. My symbol is a TV with a red X across it, so stop watching the Hypno box. But it was because I was bickering with somebody online about Catcher in the Rye. He's like, "Oh, Catcher in the Rye had nothing to do with the death of Lennon." And so I was like, I knew there was more to that story. I knew that Chapman was strange and that he had the book. So I did a kind of deep dive and looked into some books that did that. Then I saw your documentary, The Clockwork Shining, and saw these people in there. And of course, I was on Walter Bosley's show, who's also in your documentary. I think he's in the chat right now. Hey, Walter, hey, everybody. Hi, Clip Kyoto. Anyway, I was going to be on his show and started doing more and more research. And I read the book. So the book to me was really troubling. Like, actually, I'd read it in high school and I did a grok search, and this book has sold 65 million copies worldwide. It's really a cultural phenomenon. So it's not like some kind of lost book or anything. High school students have been exposed to this book, whether they read it or understood it or not, for generations, for decades. And it's tied into The Shining, much like your documentary had. Other films, one is Conspiracy Theory, and another is Chapters of 27 with Jared Leto, which is really about Chapman. But also it's tied into these assassinations. We have close to each other, too. The death of Lennon, the attempted killing of Reagan, and then there was one later in Hollywood. Her name was Rebecca Schaefer. And I'm trying to tie in, and we'll see this Atwill. He did two that I know of. He did two papers. One was about the Masonic influence in Catcher in the Rye, and the other is pedophilia in Catcher in the Rye, which is really there, and it's very disturbing. So that's kind of led up to this presentation, because I think it's important for people to understand this kind of culture creation. And this book ties into Kinsey, believe it or not, who came out with Sexuality in the Male in 1948. And there's repeated phrases in this book that ape his research, which I've researched it and done a lot of inquiry into Kinsey, and he's a complete fraud, and all his work is fake, and his conclusions are the same as Crowley's. You can pretty much do whatever you want. And he was involved in really horrible abuse, like next level abuse of kids and stuff like that. Pedophile. But I mean, so you see these kind of overlaps in this post-war cultural creation, and there's mind control themes in this too. So that's why I kind of reached out to you and said, hey, you should listen to this presentation. I think you'll find it very interesting. So I think I have about 100 slides and some videos if you're interested.
All right, let's get to it.
And Tim Houston mentioned Fenton Bresler. So we're going to go into Fenton Bresler's book here in a minute. But this is the cover. This is the more famous cover, the red cover. And you'll find that this apes some of the other stuff that's in the book. So the lead character is Holden Caulfield, right? And Atwill explained this, like the call when a baby's born, if the call is part of the placenta, I believe, if it's over the face, it's like a sign of second sight. And you'll see these weird overlaps between the catcher and statements in the book and the field, right? The field of rye. So the catcher in the rye. So Holden Caulfield, actually, his name represents this kind of dreamy second sight of the field where he dreams about being a catcher in the rye. It's actually a misunderstanding. Like Atwill said, it's a misunderstanding of the Robert Burns poem that says, it's a different phrase in the Robert Burns poem, which is, I'm trying to remember it offhand. It's if a body catch a body coming through a rye. So it's not like it's catching a body, but it's not like it's the person's given a proper noun of catcher. So
he's essentially saying that he wants to catch the children
before they go off the cliff. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But also there's this other element of catching. There's a trigger at the very end of the book where he sees the words "F-U" all written out. And he says, if I catch that guy, I'm going to kill him. So there's a very strong, violent, driving language, like almost like psycholinguistics going on from the very beginning of this book. And I found it to be very profound, and repetitive phrases are in this book as well, where he says like, you will, you will, you will. And we'll see this in there. They talk about dissociative states. The character Holden Caulfield is in the care of a psychiatrist, like at 13.
Yeah, he's in the
And
psych ward.
yeah,
So,
no, the book ends with him in a psych ward.
yeah. Can you control the slides from your end,
Yeah, of course.
or do I control them? Oh, okay.
We can
I was
both
just
do
making
it.
sure.
You
Okay.
can just do the slides. But like these are the common images associated with the book. Is this one book, and then this is the one, the carousel, where he sees his sister. He's his favorite person. What he's trying to do after he leaves Pensy, um, which is the prep school that he was at. He's trying to go see his sister Phoebe, who's 10, and he identifies with her, but he always says she kills me, like really strong language. And you see that he's dissociating, and he also doesn't see reality right. He doesn't, when it takes place, he's going into Central Park, right where Chapman was. This is incredible overlays. But Holden Caulfield is in Central Park, and the carousel's in Central Park, and he doesn't understand where the ducks go. So he writes like, where do the ducks go when they're not there? He doesn't understand that the ducks fly south for the winter, right? Simple things that a 16-year-old should understand. So you see this kind of thing where he's detached from reality, like a schizo. But this is why you see this imagery here. And that's the kind of subtext of this kind of attraction to his sister. He dances with his sister. He pinches her body. She's in bed. He puts a pillow over her face. There's all kinds of really unnerving elements that I think Atwell keys into in his paper, which I read. But this is this hat. He uses this hat to put on. It's a human hunting hat. He puts it on to hunt people. He wears a people shooting hat. I shoot people with this hat, is what he says. He has almost every negative psychological trait available. He's a pyromaniac. He says he's a sex maniac, but he's impotent. He's an incel. He's actually really an incel. He's always talking about sex. He's had like 10 or 20 pedophile experiences in his life, or somebody's hitting on him, or trying, which is one in this book, his Professor Antolini. He wakes up and this professor's petting his head while he's on a couch. He has all kinds of stuff. He's suicidal. He's chain smokes. He's fascinated and scared by blood. So there's very strong themes when you really take apart this book in a paranoid way or a critical way. It gets really weird. But this imagery at first glance is just a guy walking around with a weird hat, talking about ducks. But this typifies and exemplifies the character of Holden Caulfield. Guy wearing a human hunting hat who cannot understand where the ducks go, right?
Yeah, that's and this dissociative identity disorder is commonly happens to people like through trauma, and that's essentially what the doctor is saying to Wendy in the beginning of The Shining, is that these visions and these abilities that Danny was developing came after the time that Jack abused Danny. So it comes from abuse that you normally get this dissociative disorder.
And there's that element. Phoebe's always saying, "Dad is going to kill you. Dad's going to kill you." And it makes the father look very strong. He's never really shown in this thing, like it's the lack of parenting. The mother's there, but the dad's not around. It's kind of like a Disney movie, where the dad's never there. But for all these characters, all these female characters. But yeah, it's really strange. Like he may have been he was in the care of a shrink since he was 13. His brother had died, and he broke all these windows somewhere. And he writes, didn't know what I was doing. I didn't remember what it was. And the movie starts out where he's on a hill overlooking the school, and he says it was cold as a witch's teat, especially on top of that stupid hill. So everything's negative. He's totally nihilistic. And it's a depersonalization trait. So because everybody's phony and fake, he's like depersonalizing them as real people. They're just all phonies and fakes.
Is that where that phrase comes from? Is cold as a witch's teat?
I don't think so. I don't think it comes from this, but it's a figure of speech. But basically, that means he starts off this whole narrative alone on top of a hill, on top of something he calls as a witch's boob, witch's breast, which is kind of like telling. It ties into this kind of impression that I think the writer's trying to give, that he's special, or the call and the thing and the witches thing. And there's all kinds of kind of dark references in this, actually, believe it or not. He goes into like this Egyptian tomb and sees mummies, and he goes to a bar called the Wicker Bar, if you remember the Wicker Man. That's like human sacrifice. So, and there's hints of, sexual abuse of care of Dr. Thurmer. I mean, this book is, you could see why people were upset with this book. It's full of loaded stuff. It's very dark even for 1951. And he repeats to himself, "I'm like a madman." He says he's a madman over and over. So he's almost like driving himself into this psychological state. I'm a madman. It's just
self-hypnosis. That's also what the doctor said to Wendy as to the reason why he's having these visions and having these abilities is through self-hypnosis.
He talks to the mother of one of his cohorts at school, and he says, "I put her into a trance." So this whole thing of like a trance state, which we'll see that's reflected in Chapman. Even the word is used in the description of Chapman. These are psychological states. This was supposedly written by Salinger when he was 32. He was definitely in intel. He had already come back from World War II. But and there's weird overlaps with a lot of stuff going on in World War II, where they were like debriefing Nazis and finding Nazis. And Ewan Cameron was there, who was the guy who did the notorious kind of experiments up at McGill University, right? The ones that were the MK Ultra Association. Yeah. But he wrote a couple books about like how, like the psychology of Germans and how do we stop this war again. They're really hard to find, but he was definitely involved in the war, much like Salinger was. Salinger went into a mental institution for he went in for what they called shell shock, PTSD or something like that.
Right after the war?
Yeah.
He went? Wow. So then he got out and then he wrote this book?
Exactly. So he came out.
Wait, did he write the book in the psych ward?
There's it gets really strange. Like there's not a lot. We know that he had a relationship with a young girl when he was 32 and she was 14, and she actually is online. So like this, it's almost like aping this relationship, this pedophile relationship in the book, in his real life. And she's online talking about a relationship with this kind of shut-in. Salinger kind of disappeared. He became a recluse, and he had no other real achievements. He had Franny and Zoe, but he had no other kind of like literary, nothing like the sales of this book. But yeah, so like he comes out of a mental institution and writes his book. There's no doubt about it.
That would be so wild if he at least had the thought to write the book while he was in the mental institution. And then he writes a book about a guy writing a book inside of a mental institution.
Right. No, it gets really strange. So there's this idea of insanity or breakdown, dissociative states. He clearly is dissociative and he doesn't keep things together, but there's also sexual perverse themes, sadism, transvestism, voyeurism, prostitution. Like it's dark. Like but he's an incel. He gets a prostitute from this guy Manuel, who's the guy who's managing or running the elevator, and he just talks to her, but he calls himself a sex maniac in his mind, but he doesn't complete the act with the woman, which is kind of makes him even more of a frustrated person, right? Because he's like he's always asking everybody about their sex lives, but he doesn't have one. So like his roommate Stratlater and his girlfriend and all this other stuff. But he always blames everybody else. It's never his fault. People are always ruining things for you, he says. Oh, one of the sadist things he said is a woman's body is a violin. So like that's kind of like a really dark BDSM kind of concept, like to say that for a 16-year-old. But one of the other elements of this book is it's anti-Christian, and it's very stark. He does not he thinks all of the apostles are chumps, and he identifies with the lunatic in the Bible. I don't know if you remember the story of Legion. Have you ever heard that part of the Bible?
No, but I've seen the movie Legion. Is it anything?
It's based on Legion, that movie. The concept of Legion is based on the sequence in the Bible. I forgot what's Mark 5:4. Christ goes out into the wilderness, and there's a man who cannot be restrained. He's demon possessed. And Christ says, he says, Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" And the response is, "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs, allow us to go into them." He gave them permission, and the impure spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. So this is who Holden Caulfield identifies with, is Legion, a literal demon-possessed man.
Wild.
Yeah, so it gets really crazy. He asked later, is Judas going to hell? He's suicidal. And he says in one sequence, page 174, "I swear to God, I'm a madman." And then this guy, Luce, who's probably based upon Luce, who ran Time Life back in the day, he's like the sexologist, but he's repeating this Kinsey idea. Like he says to Holden Caulfield, half of married guys were gay, which isn't true. It's less than 10% or 5%. It's complete nonsense. But that was the kind of social change they were pushing. So this book is part of that kind of culture creation or culture nudging or anything like that. So it's just really crazy. I mean, he dissociates the narrative. It's in his mind. And then the book ends with like, it doesn't end with like a positive finish. It doesn't end like, this is what I learned from this experience. He says he breaks the fourth wall. He's talking to you because you're in his mind, which is really kind of a dark psychological space too, because you're not reading like this. You're not watching this narrative from outside looking in. You're in his brain. And he says, I don't know why I'm telling you this. I guess I'm just telling you this because it's there and I don't know what to think about it. So he doesn't have like a positive conclusion for or against what's gone on in his book. His sister's not around and his parents aren't around, and he's in a mental institution. So the book itself has these really profound psychological states. It has the subtext of like he's like getting abused by his professors. People are committing suicide. It's very dark, but then, this is 65 million copies. That's what Salinger looked like, right? Holden Caulfield's, and this is kind of a thing overlapping about Salinger, who was a rich guy who grew up in New York. So he's kind of similar to Caulfield in that way. Caulfield's rich in the book, wealthy. And then that's him like landing at Normandy, 77. That's his cat. So we know he was in the war. But it goes all the way up. This book goes all the way up to these killers, right? Mark David Chapman making this thing. And then 3.5 months later, Hinckley making the same hand sign is, supposedly shot at
Ronald Reagan.
Shot Ronald Reagan. So
isn't it interesting how they look very similar? Have you noticed that?
Yeah. Why do they have that still face? Right.
When I was making the documentary, I actually got confused at a couple of points, and I had to go back and make sure that whenever people were talking about Mark David Chapman or John Hinckley Jr., that I was bringing up the right person on screen, because they look so similar.
Yeah, no, there's something eerie about the similarities between them and their attachment to this book. Yeah. And we'll find out. I'll show you the kind of Fenton Bresler book. They like Chapman took on this character of Holden Caulfield, but he just suddenly kind of like had an affection for Catcher in the Rye, which is kind of inexplicable. How does somebody just start picking it up? But we'll read some stuff. But this is an interesting thing. This is from TMZ. John Hinckley Jr. asked by ex-users to assassinate Donald Trump. This is from November, So like this is still kind of current. He's still around. He's on social media. But this whole relationship between Caulfield and his sister Phoebe is aped by this movie Taxi Driver, where the character Travis Bickle is based on Arthur Bremer, who Bickle is the Hinckley idolizes Bickle, right? So Bickle's based on Bremer. Bremer's tried to kill George Wallace and put him in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. But Hinckley had this kind of relationship like Caulfield with his sister, this imagined relationship with Jodie Foster. And she's like in my opinion, sexualized 12-year-old or whatever by Bickle. But he's suicidal, Hinckley is, but this is from The President Has Been Shot. And it's an interesting passage because Hinckley, listen to this. Hinckley identified with Travis and began to act like him after he'd seen the film 15 times. So he had watched Taxi Driver 15 times. He bought the same clothes, ate the same foods, drank the same liquors, and invented a girlfriend just as had Bickle. So he's taking on the persona of Travis Bickle, this fictional film, but supposedly doing stuff in real life, right? And then you have this other guy, Robert John Bardo. Some people don't know about this case. It's a scary looking dude. But he killed Rebecca Schaefer. He went to her door. And there's weird things about him, too, in addition to his affinity for The Catcher in the Rye, right? And this is from an article that I found. I'll read it to you.
Was Catcher in the Rye found on his person as well? Like,
yeah. A red paperback copy of the one we saw at the beginning. A red paperback copy of Catcher in the Rye was found on the roof of the Beverly Palms Rehabilitation Center on Beverly Boulevard. He, Bardo, indicated that he threw a red-covered paperback book entitled Catcher in the Rye in the alley when he was running, said Escoto. The discovery of the book harked back to the 1981 shooting of former Beatle, it was actually 1980, former Beatle John Lennon by one-time mental patient Mark David Chapman in New York City. After the obsessed fan shot the rock singer, he calmly took out a copy of the J.D. Salinger novel and was reading it when police arrived. And so then you see here the newspapers at the time like dealt with Hinckley and Mark David Chapman at the same time. So this is like the same page of a newspaper, and it says reads Catcher in the Rye passage in court. And we'll get to that. I'll explain this, but it gets weird. So there's Hinckley, who started to do this, and then there's Bardo. Obsessed fan Robert Bardo carried The Catcher in the Rye in his assassin's kit to kill actress Rebecca Schaefer because John Lennon's killer carried the same book. Park Dietz, who, if you watch like TV, he's on TV all the time. Bardo was not insane when he killed the actress, but suffered from a schizophrenic disorder known as splitting, which hampered his ability to form the intent for murder, the psychiatrist testified. Dietz, concluding 8 days on the witness stand, said that Bardo's splitting meant he alternated between seeing Schaefer as all evil or all good, but was not aware of the shift in his emotion. So he's like Holden Caulfield. He doesn't recognize. He doesn't have that kind of self-analytical skill.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure John Hinckley has been released from. I think he got released. Well, he wasn't in prison. I think he was in a psychiatric facility for around 30 years, and then they released him in 2022, I believe. And I think he has a YouTube channel now where he like it's a music YouTube channel about like folk music.
Yeah, he plays stuff. I think he plays stuff on request, you know. Just more stuff about the Rye and Hinckley and Chapman is right here. This kind of accused killer had a copy of Catcher. That's Rebecca Schaefer.
That's wild.
And it's supposedly, and we'll see this kind of thing here with Atwell's work, but it's supposedly linked to JFK because supposedly, I haven't verified this, but not only did Oswald have a copy, but he liked the book.
Yeah, supposedly it was his favorite book as well. Yeah. But yeah, I've been trying to find out where that came from as well, and I haven't been able to track down that source. But as soon as I do, I'll be sure to let you know.
If anybody out there knows where that source is, please let us know. We mentioned Atwell, but we were talking about that, kind of chatting about that outside of this presentation. This is kind of the infamous scene. This was, like you said, this was 79, right? So this is even before the killings?
Well, 80. It was released in 80, so it was filmed in 79 and released in 80. I think it was started filming in 78, so released in 80. But yeah, this was roughly around a year before both attempted assassinations. And what year and date was the other one that you mentioned?
Who, Bardo?
Yeah,
Bardo, I think, was in the late 80s.
Okay, so several years later, but still.
Yeah, it wasn't close around this, but yeah, this is incredible. I mean, and apparently at the very end of Catcher in the Rye, Phoebe's wearing a blue dress like this. So they're insinuating that she's Phoebe. I think Wendy is Phoebe.
How could Kubrick know to put that book that it was going to be involved in all of these assassinations? I have absolutely no idea. And then throughout The Shining, that's what Jack is trying to do to his family. He's trying to assassinate and kill his family.
Right. This is from the movie Conspiracy Theory. Maybe you can play this video right here.
How
get a
long?
chance.
How long is it? Do you know?
Oh, like 30 seconds. I don't. Maybe you might get into trouble on YouTube. Actually, maybe it's not a good idea. I have a video of this sequence where he goes into a bookstore, Mel Gibson's character, and buys a Catcher in the Rye.
Oh yeah, I've seen that one. That one's
Yeah. So this is at will stuff. This is at will's Catcher in the Rye, and the last sentence is: "It is alleged that Lee Harvey Oswald had a copy in his apartment, and that it was one of his favorite books. Although this is disputed, but that's his Freemason in the Rye from his website. This is from 2015, so I think he keyed into that.
yeah.
This is one of his statements. This is a people shooting hat. I said I shoot people in this hat. This is the repetitive statements that happen throughout this book, and I think it's intentional. Like Trump repeats statements all the time. He's doing it intentionally because he wants the idea to get planted in your head, right? That's why people repeat these phrases.
And then
And this is currently
Jack in The Shining that's repeating the same phrase over and over again.
Exactly.
Writing it out.
Exactly. So this is kind of like you can go get the audiobook to Catcher in the Rye. This is the picture on there. So it's Holden wearing the human hunting hat. I shoot people in this hat. It's very dark. I read that this guy doesn't even believe that Chapman shot Lennon. He was there, but he was just a patsy fully. This is David Whelan. This is the most recent book on this. He calls it mind games. He has tons of stuff on mind control in this book. But I'm going to go to a more recent book, Fenton Breslin, and read from this. I think you'll find it.
Well, that's what Walter talks about in the documentary. He's kind of on the fence if Sirhan actually shot RFK because there's a lot of really strange evidence pointing to the fact that the Sirhan may have not even have done it. So
I've done some shows on that. I've talked to some very good researchers, and the kill shot for RFK came behind his head, according to the medical examiner. I think it was Horiuchi. He said came from an inch behind his head, and Sirhan was never behind him; it was always in front of him.
Yep. And
we'll get into some of the Sirhan's repetitive phrases, but these are just interesting. And this is that's interesting you bring up Sirhan because this is a connection between Sirhan and Chapman. This is a secret. This is from page 49. When you come to read in detail about how Mark Chapman behaved after Lennon's murder, you will find a striking parallel between the dazed in a trance-like condition of the two men. Mark remembered more of the actual killing, but otherwise their reactions were almost identical. So I saw him the night of the murder. I studied him intensely. He looked as if he could have been programmed, and I know what use you are going to make of that word. So that's Sirhan, and Chapman. And that word trance is in this book too. Like Holden's putting somebody else into a trance. It's crazy.
Wow. So hypnotizing them, essentially. Yeah.
The connection between Sirhan and Chapman is they had the same doctor, Dr. Bernard Diamond. And this is in this book as a footnote, but I think it's one of the most important things. There's an odd footnote to all this. The principal medical defense witness for Sirhan was Dr. Bernard Diamond of the University of California, one of America's leading psychiatrists to use hypnosis in his work. 13 years later, he was to be one of the defense psychiatrists in Mark's case. His diagnosis for the two men was the same, paranoid schizophrenia. Yet he seems not to have used hypnosis in either of his two interviews with Mark, although he hypnotized Sirhan on 6 of his 8 visits to great effect. For instance, when Dr. Diamond asked Sirhan where he had concealed his gun while waiting for Kennedy, Sirhan, in his trance, went for the inside of his belt on the left side, and police at last knew where he had carried the weapon.
Wait, so he's hypnotizing him after? This is a therapist that's hypnotizing him after he had supposedly murdered RFK?
Correct.
What is the reasoning behind that?
They wanted to study him. Chapman had 6 doctors. He had another guy, Klein, who was a known hypnotist. He was surrounded by hypnotists. He's surrounded by doctors. Even he worked at a hospital in Honolulu or on Oahu. And we'll see this connection to Ruth here in a second. This guy, the second attempted killer of Trump, he was basically 3,000 yards or 2 miles away from where Chapman lived. And then Mangione also was from Oahu as well. So you have 3 strange kind of guys who are traveling around, and even Mangione, literally the shooting of the healthcare CEO was 6 or 7 blocks from Central Park, where all of the narrative of Catcher in the Rye takes place. It's incredible.
That's so strange that they would bring in so many hypnotists, because we know with hypnotists they can essentially like guide you and put things essentially into your head that may or may not have even have happened. They could essentially be leading him. I mean, that's a common thing with hypnotherapists. Like, I forget what they call it, but it's called like it's like essentially leading the person whenever they're in like a vulnerable state, and whenever they're relaxed, they can like essentially put things into their head that aren't even there, and like make them believe it.
False memories, right?
False memories. Yep.
So you see this kind of thing happening in real life, Sirhan. There's repetitive stuff. I've pointed it out. That's in this book, Catcher in the Rye. This is another, just to kind of continue reading. A crucial piece of evidence against Sirhan to prove premeditation was a page from various notebooks found in his bedroom in which he had written these jumbled words. My determination to eliminate RFK is becoming more and more of an unshakable obsession. RFK must die. RFK must be killed. Robert F. Kennedy must be assassinated. Repetitive over and over again. It's still current. His son is now the head of the, HHS or whatever, RFK Jr. So the past is present. And then he goes on to say, at one point, Dr. Diamond showed him a photocopy of one of the bizarre entries and questioned him about it while he was still in a hypnotic trance. Is this crazy writing? Diamond asked. Yes, Sirhan wrote. Are you crazy? No. Well, why are you writing crazy? Practice. Practice for what? Mind control was the written reply.
Wild.
And so this is kind of like what I was saying about this thing where he says, I will. You see that? I have to go back through the book and point out all the places where these repetitive phrases are, but they're throughout Catcher in the Rye, and it's not an accident. This is another one. The second popular misconception about Mark relates to J.G. Salinger's famous novel, The Catcher in the Rye. This is again Fenton Bresler. The theory that he had always identified himself with Holden Caulfield, the book's phony, hating 16-year-old hero, not really hero, ever since he first read Catcher at the same age. After all, this is the book that amazed New York policemen found him reading quietly outside the Dakota when he had thrown down his gun immediately after killing Lennon, with the inscription inside the cover written by Mark, to Holden Caulfield, from Holden Caulfield. This is my statement. So he had become Holden Caulfield in his mind. In his prison cell awaiting trial, he maintained the reason I killed John Lennon was to gain prominence to promote the reading of J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye. I'm not saying I'm a messiah or anything like that. If you read the book and if you understand my past, you will see that I am indeed the catcher in the rye of this generation.
So it's essentially fiction, like
right,
duplicating like reality, like mimicking reality, or they're trying to make reality mimic fiction.
Very good. And it's the same thing that happens with Hinckley too. It's really incredible. I'll show you some video that I don't think is copyrighted problem, but I know that you're concerned about YouTube, but we'll show it later of this guy Bremer, and then I'll show I don't think I can show the stuff from Taxi Driver, but it's like you just said, fiction becoming reality.
And that's happened several times with Kubrick. I'm pretty sure I mentioned it on your show a couple of months ago too, with A Clockwork Orange. That's what was happening in the UK. People were going on and duplicating the things that were going on with A Clockwork Orange. And then with Lolita, the same thing was happening to Sue Lyon by James B. Harris, which was Kubrick's producer, was doing the exact same thing to her as what Lolita was essentially about, which was pedophilia. When she was 14 years old, she was being abused by Kubrick's producer, James B. Harris. It's like, then it just keeps going on and on, like right. With The Shining.
These are the themes in here. So Salinger's real life apes the fake stuff here, which goes to, Taxi Driver and all this crazy stuff. This is like another interesting thing about The Catcher in the Rye. He takes it on really leading up to the assassination of Lennon. He didn't have it around. It was clearly a difficult time for him. Now an ominous new factor came into his life. He became interested in The Catcher in the Rye. We do not know why. We do not know if anyone suggested it to him, and if so, who. Catcher is a book that most people read once in their lifetime in their teens, and that is it. Why on earth, seemingly out of the blue, did Mark suddenly get so involved in a book that, like most of his generation of young Americans, he had already read before at school nearly 10 years ago?
I think that's pretty accurate. I don't think that people really read it more than one time because it's an abysmal book. It's like
Yeah.
not a good
Yeah.
book. It's not really a good read. So when it was required reading, several people in the chat have, and every time I do a show like this or talk about Catcher in the Rye, they comment. They're like, when I was growing up in school, like this was required reading for everyone. So when it's required reading, you tend to only read it like one time, and then it kind of gets stuck in your subconscious mind. I think that's what's also going on with the music industry. That's what's going on with film and TV. It's like this thing that's like just stuck in the back of your head, and then it manifests in your real life when you don't really even know it. I mean, I've seen similarities to that with like Sum 41, like the band Sum 41, and like the song Fat Lip. Like I used to love that song, and then the things that are being talked about in that song, it kind of essentially played out in my life. It's so weird, but I think that that's something similar to like this book. It's like a subconscious thing, and I mean, it has to be.
I think you're right. I think you're right. And he says this right here. If Catcher, with its explosive effect on Mark, was indeed the trigger for his program mind, serving to put him on alert in case of call, it all does seem to come together with remarkable neatness. Yeah, I think they're right. It's a lot. I mean, they talk about him being controlled, the passage towards the end. This is the whole thing about the Catcher on the Rye. But this is interesting. This is the thing that I think Atwell was talking about, the FU, you know. But this is the sequence where you see the word catch associated with ultraviolence. And so it's kind of like the darker take on catch. So I'll read this here. Holden, visiting his beloved young sister Phoebe's school in an abortive attempt to talk to her, sees the words FU written on a wall. Quote, "It drove me damn near crazy." He's always madman and crazy, by the way. "It drove me damn near crazy. I thought how Phoebe and all the other little kids would see it and how they'd wonder what the hell it meant. And then finally some dirty kid would tell them. I kept wanting to kill who'd ever written it. I figure it was some perverty bum that sneaked into the high school late at night and then wrote it on the wall. I kept picturing myself catching him," right? So the catch kind of phrase, same word, right? "I pictured myself catching him at it and how I'd smash his head on the stone steps till he was good and goddamn dead and bloody. But I knew, too, I wouldn't have the guts to do it. That made me even more repressed." So, like, he's like, or depressed, excuse me. But he is repressed. He's kind of a repressed violent person, a repressed sex maniac. So, like, he's like, oh, he has this pent-up anger inside him that he doesn't express. Does that make sense?
Yeah, classic incel behavior. And like, what have we seen? We've seen like this jump in incel behavior since the early 2000s, and that would hit around a couple of generations later, right? Like after the book was released, it would be a couple of generations after that where we start seeing this influx of incel types of people,
Right.
especially when it's related to, school shootings. It's
right. I know, this is the theme. It's really crazy. There was that one guy who shot up Santa Barbara, UC Santa Barbara. Remember him? He was an incel, and like he just had all this pent up rage, and then he snapped one day.
Yep.
Mark was clearly going through torment. He told his perplexed wife that he was thinking of changing his name to Holden Caulfield. On 10th of September, he actually wrote to a school teacher friend named Linda Irish, who had moved from Honolulu to Mexico. Quote, "I'm going nuts," unquote. He drew a picture of Diamond Head Mountain with the sun, the moon, the stars above it, and signed the letter, "The Catcher in the Rye, Mark." So, like, he's identifying with Holden Caulfield. He's becoming him. And he writes this later, like, it's just crazy. He wrote this is the day of the murder. As he walked the 20 blocks up to the Dakota on West 72nd Street, incongruous amid the lightly dressed New Yorkers with his heavy winter gear, he realized he was missing a prop. He had with him his Double Fantasy album, but something was missing. He halted his progress towards Lennon's selected place of execution and dived into a bookshop to emerge with a red paperback copy of The Catcher in the Rye. On the title page, he wrote, "To Holden Caulfield, from Holden Caulfield," and below that, "This is my statement." So the book was his statement.
Wow. Yeah, that's what he said. He stood up in court and was like, if you want my defense, all you got to do is read Catcher in the Rye." But
yeah, and he in between, he's seeing people, he's reading the book. So if something happens, he sits down and starts reading again. Crazy.
You see this duplication of, I mean, we see this a lot in like through celebrities and like idol worship of actors and people like that. Like they see these people and then like they want to like be them and like imitate them. Like whenever you see like models like and very attractive women on TV and stuff, like women automatically want to like look like them. You know what I mean? It's like this like innate thing. And all of those people are very unrealistic styles of like beauty. So then it diminishes what they actually are because they want to be somebody else. They want to get fake tits. They want to get lip injections. They want to get all this stuff because they're seeing this unrealistic style of beauty and they want to be like it. And that's kind of like what is going on here is that he's trying to duplicate this. I mean, the book is obviously 100%, fiction, but he's trying to duplicate this fictionalized character and be him. I mean, Holden Caulfield to Holden Caulfield, he's essentially saying that he is him.
Right. And you'll see that with Hinckley, or I said that in the intro where Hinckley's becoming Travis Bickle. So you see that same phenomenon taking place. So he supposedly does the killing December 8th, 1980. On February 1st, he sits down and writes something to the New York Times. And he writes this, he quote, "It is my sincere belief that presenting this written statement will not only stimulate the reading of J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye, but also will help many to understand what has happened. If you're able to view the actual copy of The Catcher in the Rye that was taken from me on the night of December 8th, you would find in it the handwritten words, 'This is my statement.' Unfortunately, I was unable to continue this stance and have since spoken openly with the police, doctors, and others involved in this case. I now fully realize that this should not have been done, for it removed the emphasis that I wanted to place on the book. My wish is for all of you to someday read The Catcher in the Rye. All of my efforts will now be devoted towards this goal, for this extraordinary book holds many answers. My true hope is that in wanting to find these answers, you will read The Catcher in the Rye. Thank you. Mark David Chapman, The Catcher in the Rye."
I mean, it kind of did really soar into popularity.
Right. So there's some push to get this book into people's brains. And then in court, August 1981, he walks into court, he carries with him a copy of The Catcher in the Rye. And then in court, he's like, this is it. He mentions this one section about phonies and his Phoebe and him being the catcher in the Rye. It's incredible. So this is from Rawhide Down. That was Reagan's Secret Service code was Rawhide. And this is Hinckley. 4-day trip was a blur of fast food and brief stops: Las Vegas, Cheyenne, Chicago, Cleveland, Pittsburgh. Traveling through Utah, he woke from a brief nap to find the bus hurtling through a massive snowstorm. He spent much of the trip slouched in a window seat, watching the scenery stream by or reading The Catcher in the Rye, J.D. Salinger's novel of teenage angst and alienation. He identified with the story's main character, Holden Caulfield, but the book was also special to him because he knew that John Lennon's assassin had pulled it from his pocket and leafed through it moments after gunning down the rock and roll icon. Lennon, who had been killed 3.5 months earlier, was Hinckley's favorite musician. Even so, he sometimes felt they identified more with Lennon's killer than with Lennon himself.
Who was driving because John Hinckley was firing the shots from the back seat of the vehicle, right? Who was driving the car? Do you know?
When Reagan got shot?
Yeah, that's what.
I don't know, but Hinckley was supposedly in the crowd at another hotel that Reagan was walking out of. I have video of it. I don't know if I probably can show it.
Yeah, the video in our documentary too.
Oh yeah, okay.
Secret Service people were like they all had guns too. Dude, they had like
there were
ARs. Like they were stocked to the freaking barrel, dude. They all had them surrounded. They had big giant guns. I was like, holy crap! Like, what were you expecting? Were you expecting this to happen? Did you know that this was going to happen?
Right. I mean, you kind of wonder.
The president emerged from the Washington Hilton Hotel.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, so I don't know, but let me see what are my other slides. I think I got just a few more things. I go into kind of Bremer. I know we're on a time crunch. Where are we at? 60 minutes now? Yeah.
We're good. We're good until you're finished with the presentation.
Okay. Guess whose one of favorite books? This is George Herbert Walker Bush. Was there a book that inspired you? There was a marvelous book by Salinger called Catcher in the Rye. So who would have benefited if Reagan died? It would in Bush, right? Guess who else likes Catcher in the Rye and promotes it? This ghoul.
Bill Gates. Is that Gates?
Yeah, Bill Gates. This is by Bill Gates. This is an article by Bill Gates from 2013. You may notice there aren't any novels on my list this year. It's not that I don't enjoy fiction. I've read The Catcher in the Rye a bunch of times. It's one of my favorite books ever.
Oh my God.
Yeah, crazy, huh?
Genocidal maniac.
Yeah, genocidal. Ruth, and then this Crooks guy, these strange people. The Good Girl was a movie that had a lot of themes from Catcher in the Rye. This is Leto as Chapman in chapter 27. I could play some video for that, but I don't want you to get a strike.
Which is so wild because Leto owns Lookout Mountain Hotel in Laurel Canyon. He bought that military base up there. I had no idea that he had played Chapman in a movie until I was researching all this stuff for the documentary, but we didn't talk about it because everything was like already filmed. I was like, holy crap, that's a crazy wild connection there.
And he quotes from the book, and he's at the Dakota, so he's in there in 27. But also he has this kind of little, almost like a temple thing in his hotel where he pulls out the Wizard of Oz stuff, which is also kind of a known programming guide too. So like Chapman to me has definitely been tampered with. These are just word names of the old name, like the call. Various traditions have viewed it as a sign of spiritual or psychic ability. Some folklore. The call was believed to bestow second sight on the ability to see in the future. And so this guy, Ruth, I think is still under arrest. The NYPD claims to have found the CEO shooter's backpack near the carousel in Central Park, exactly where The Catcher in the Rye ends. So this guy, Mangione, who we're going to get into. But,
yeah, let's talk about old Luigi there. There's some really strange stuff.
Yeah, we're getting there. He's in this. We're going to get in there. But here's the thing. Travis Bickle and taxi driver Arthur Bremer. Bremer attempted to assassinate Alabama Governor George Wallace in 1972. His diary, which detailed his descent into isolation in his assassination attempt, influenced the character development of Bickle. What movie did Bremer watch like 2 weeks before and emulate 2 weeks before he attempted to kill George Wallace? You want to take a guess?
Taxi Driver?
A Clockwork Orange.
A Clockwork Orange. Oh my God. Oh my God.
Yeah, you can't make this stuff up.
Wow.
Yeah. There's a reference to like the CIA. So I'm trying to trace how the genesis of this book, because it's 65 million books sold. Cultural Cold War. They kind of mention like supporting new authors, the CIA does, through cutouts. There's this Encounter magazine. It says, or you urging Spender to open the literary pages to a new generation of American writers like Saul Bellow, J.D. Salinger, Truman Capote, Shirley Ann Grau. This is Bremer right here, right? So this is the guy who tried to kill Wallace in 1974. That Travis Bickle was partly based on real-life assassin Arthur Bremer. Do you see this picture? This is the same gesture that this is before, but the same gesture that Chapman and Hinckley are making, right?
Yeah.
That's Bremer right there. That's Wallace shot. This is his May 4th. This is before the shooting. Milwaukee, saw Clockwork Orange and thought about getting Wallace all through the picture, fantasizing myself as the Alex or Alec, but without my brother. Just a little of the old ultraviolence. I've decided Wallace would have the honor of, what would you call it? So these guys are identifying with these fictional characters, whether it's Bickle, Alex, or Holden Caulfield. Incredible, huh? Wild.
I did not know this.
Yeah. Byron Bremer's diary was a primary inspiration for screenwriter Paul Schrader's character, Travis Bickle, played by Robert De Niro. It gets even darker because Howard Hunt's involved in this. They're trying to go into Bremer's thing and place campaign literature for the Democratic Party. That's according to Seymour Hersh, who's unparalleled, like one of the greatest American journalists. My Lie and all this other stuff. In his memoir, E. Howard Hunt reports the day after the assassination attempt, he received a call from Chuck Colson asking him to break into Bremer's apartment and plant leftist literature to connect him to the Democrats. Hunt recalls that he was highly skeptical of the plan due to the apartment being guarded by the FBI, which is baloney. The FBI and CIA are like usually pretty tight, but investigated the feasibility of it anyway at Colson's insistence. G. Gordon Liddy also discusses the plan in his memoir. So let me see if I can play this. This is pretty incredible, of Arthur Bremer shooting Wallace. Let's see. But it's creepy because you can see that taxi drivers literally ripping off the documented assassination of Wallace. There's no question about it. They had to have seen it and integrated it into the film. So when you're watching that film, you're watching this. Can you play that? That's Bremer right there. He's watching, he's clapping, he's happy. Watch this. He's in the crowd. He's got all his regalia on, right? It's crazy. Here's another one. Let me see if I can find this. That's not it.
When did this happen? When did this one go down?
72. I think it was 72. But listen to this. Listen to his family. His family. Let's see if I can read this. His family's like mystified. His dad's like, "How did this happen? We don't even know. This is totally out of character." Can you play this?
Yeah.
Arthur Bremer shot Alabama Governor George Wallace on May 15, 1972, while Wallace was holding a presidential campaign rally in Laurel, Maryland. Police immediately arrested Bremer, and after they learned his identity, Secret Service and FBI agents searched Bremer's Milwaukee apartment. Inside, they found a Confederate flag and .38 caliber bullets like the ones used to shoot Wallace. Bremer's father and his brother couldn't believe it.
There's no explanation for if it was him, his behavior, and what had happened. There's no explanation we can give at all.
Isn't that so interesting? Like, that's sort of like what everyone's family members say when some event like this always happens. Like, he was such, like, the neighbors always come out. The neighbors are, "Oh, he was such a good guy. He was always helpful. He always helped me bring in my groceries. I couldn't see him doing anything like this." Like, and then it's the same thing with this. We don't have any explanation. This is very odd behavior. Isn't that strange? What does that mean? Like,
right.
Neighbors said Bremer was odd.
He never had many friends with him. He was always like a loner.
The 21-year-old loner from Milwaukee was convicted and sentenced to prison. Now, with a long, scraggly beard and a receding hairline, Bremer appears to have aged a lot in the last 10 years. His warden describes Bremer as a model prisoner who doesn't have many friends.
I can't say categorically that he does not have any friends or associates in here, but he's not the type of inmate that walks in a group in the yard or is with a group of people in the rec halls. He's basically a loner.
The Maryland Parole Commission recently refused to move up the date when Bremer will first be eligible for parole. Meanwhile, George Wallace is running for governor of Alabama again. We went to a campaign rally in tiny Aniana, Alabama, and asked Wallace how he feels about Arthur Bremer.
I have forgiven him for shooting me, and I hope that he's asked forgiveness for having shot me.
So that's that. Let's see. Maybe we can go back and just finish these slides. I've got just a few more. Yeah. So there's like sketchy things happening around Bremer. This brings us to Mangione, right? Who's become kind of like a culture figure, like people this deny, depose, and defend, or whatever phrases being bandied around. But he had a perp walk, much like his hero Kaczynski, right? Or Kaczynski. Theodore Kaczynski. He likes Theodore Kaczynski and read his book and literally wrote a review of it, Industrial Society and Its Future, on his thing, right? So he likes Kaczynski. This is from 2024. I think this is fairly recent, January 2024. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but he basically says these actions tend to be characterized as those of a crazy Luddite, but however, they are more accurately seen as those of an extreme political revolutionary. He had the balls to recognize that peaceful protest has gotten us absolutely nowhere. So you see this kind of radicalization of Mangione, real personality change. His parents said, sent out a APB or whatever, a missing persons report. They didn't know where he was. He was in Hawaii. At least we know that he had a pretty serious back operation. He was not a United Healthcare customer. Nobody knows why he selected this guy as a target. Maybe it was because he was a fraudster or whatever. But this is his kind of one-page manifesto, Mangione. Born into a wealthy family, attends 40K a year private school, becomes valedictorian, earns a bachelor's and master's in computer science by 26. No criminal record, no behavioral red flags, clean slate. Sharp dress, photogenic, Chad, addictive, active on social media, vacations abroad, posts polished photos, look like he's thriving, lands internships and builds a resume that screams success. Spends free time exploring AI, mushrooms, and self-optimization trends. Writes a good review on Ted K. Sprinkles in safe edgy. Joins the professional world. Follows the system script. No signs of instability. Just another rising star in the tech scene. Disappears from friends for 3 months. 2024 kills United Healthcare CEO.
Psychedelic mushrooms? Did that say? Is that
Yeah.
There you go.
What's the connection? What's Kaczynski? Who was the guy who kind of ran Kaczynski? This guy Murray, another OSS guy who was in World War II. This is the guy who ran Kaczynski into possibly being crazy. So it's a direct tie from Mangione, his admiration of Kaczynski, and this kind of MK Ultra Dr. Murray. That's Henry Murray, and he admits all this stuff. 1938, Murray was recruited by the U.S. government to create a psychological profile of Adolf Hitler. So it's called a book called The Mind of Adolf Hitler. He left Harvard temporarily to serve in the U.S. Army, much like Salinger, during the Second World War, working with American intelligence agencies to help assess the psychological fitness of their agents, but probably something else. Yep. So this is what he did. This is what Murray did it was a 3-year program of breaking down Kaczynski. The experiment designed is called Multiform Assessments of Personality Development. It was deceptively framed to participants as a benign exploration of beliefs. Kaczynski, a brilliant but socially awkward sophomore, I think he was 16, super young, joined in 1959, was one of the subjects. Participants were asked to write essays detailing their personal philosophies and values. These essays were then used against them in a series of grueling interrogations. In these sessions, subjects faced a hostile interlocutor who mocked and dismantled their beliefs, often with the aid of the essays they'd written. The encounters were filmed, and participants were later forced to watch their own humiliation. Electrodes monitored physiological responses, heart rate, sweat, adding a clinical layer to the psychological assault. Murray's goal was to observe how young men, presumably still forming their identities, this is like Holden Caulfield, right, coped with extreme stress and confrontation. For Kaczynski, assigned the code name Lawful, the experience was particularly intense. Over 3 years, he endured roughly 200 hours of these sessions. Murray himself described the interrogations as vehement, sweeping, and personally abusive, a stark contrast to the ethical norms emerging in psychological research at the time.
So it was he was running these experiments. 100%.
On Kaczynski.
Yeah.
And there's a guy who wrote, this is a book about it. It was kind of Harvard and the Unabomber. He was trying to tie Murray directly to MK Ultra. He couldn't do it, but I think he wrote that all these experiments were in that era and reflected the kind of MK Ultra environment.
So you had Sirhan being surrounded by all of these hypnotherapists. You got Ted Kaczynski having psychological experiments run on him.
For 3 years, 200 hours.
Jesus.
Harvard and the Unabomber. This is the book, Alston Chase. Weird cover. And this is kind of Luigi has become kind of a certain people really like him. He's like all over New York City as kind of a hero. He's on the side of buildings and stuff. It's really crazy. And then if you go back, if we like, I don't know if we could pull up maps, but basically the shooting of this healthcare CEO took place off of Central Park. So he was in Hawaii like Chapman. He ends up in Central Park. Like he rode his bike into Central Park is what it was after he shot the guy. And that's where all the ending of Catcher in the Rye took place. And that's where the Dakota Hotel is literally closed. I mean, it's literally a 5-minute bike ride to all these sites where Holden Caulfield and the Chapman was. So that's my presentation.
Wow, that's a lot to take in. That's a lot to take in. The Clockwork Orange, dude watching a Clockwork Orange. That's wild because I just mentioned that Clockwork Orange was being basically censored in the UK and other countries because of that exact thing. I didn't know that it was happening in the US as well.
Right. The when did the Clockwork Orange? When was it released?
1970, I believe.
Gotcha. So it's the right time.
Yeah.
So you see this mind control theme going through these films and this book, and then literal real world events being influenced by so-called, I mean, it may be a better term is quasi-fiction or pseudo-fiction, because there's real things in these films and stuff like that.
Yeah, so they're taking the essentially like magic. It's almost like occult magic. They're putting something out into the consciousness of people, and then they sit back, and then somebody comes along and like duplicates it in real life, and then it plays out like that. It's so I don't even know what to think.
And then there's some phenomenon with these killers where they become these fictional characters. So Bremer fictionalizes his view of Alec or Alex DeLarge, and then it's Travis Bickle and Holden Caulfield.
Whew. And then also J.D. Salinger being locked up in the psych ward, and then probably getting the inspiration to write the book while he's in the psych ward. Like that's.
I have more research to do. So I think I've just kind of opened up the Pandora's box or Pandora's book, so to speak, because just the fact that this book is so influential and so all over the place and so many people have been exposed to it is like extraordinary. Like, why are these creeps promoting this book? Like Bush and Gates, like two elite kind of offspring, like Gates' dad is a full eugenicist, so it's like, what's going on? Why are they making sure that it's in the public mind? Why does Chapman feel the compulsion to promote the book? Everybody should read this book, Why does the school system want everybody to read this book? It's a dark book. Like as an adult, like in my knowledge of kind of stuff I've learned from you and other people and the mind control and Hans Uter and all these other characters, it's like, this is the stuff that like Sirhan Sirhan's exposed to, like before like the murders took place. So it's like, imagine a whole culture just being like exposed to this kind of this kind of mind control narrative. It's off the charts to a guy who's literally in a mental institution in the narrative. It's crazy.
Yeah, the subconscious factor and the subconscious layering I think I'm pretty spot on with that, because that's what Stanley Kubrick would do too. It's like to affect the subconscious mind of the viewer, and I 100% believe that's why all the continuity errors and it's tricking the viewer's mind to make them think that something is not right. Right, like how you would slowly be going into like a psychosis state subconsciously as you're watching the movie, just as Jack is going into his delusions and into his psychotic state.
Right. Good point.
It's another thing of like
right. Is
mimicking,
Jack
like fiction mimicking reality.
Right. Is Jack Torrance like how much like Holden Caulfield is he? Right. Like slowly going insane, not capable of self-analysis, seeing himself go insane, all that stuff.
And Jack wears that red blazer Holden Caulfield has the red hat.
Oh yeah. Wow.
I don't know. I'm gonna definitely have to look into this more. Thanks for coming on, brother,
Yeah.
and showing that presentation. It was really, really fascinating. Where can people find you online if they would like to look into more of your stuff and into your work and your podcasting, and watch your documentaries or read your books?
Yeah, all my stuff streams onto X now, and or Twitter and Rockfin and Rumble, hopefully. And then my documentaries are my Patreon, William Ramsey Investigates. I got 5 there. So if you pay $5, you can watch them all for free, $5 a month. Then 5 books on Amazon, and my podcast. You can any podcast player, Spotify, iTunes. And I covered this show, and I did a show on this kind of subject. I didn't know as much as I know now, but I did this show with Walter Bosley on this kind of subject, so people can watch that too.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Love to have you back on anytime. And
anytime.
Everybody else, thanks for everyone in the chat. Really appreciate you guys. Please be sure to hit the thumbs up button to help the channel and the algorithm. Share, subscribe, hit the bell icon as well for notifications. And all the links to William's information is in the description of this video. And also all of my links are in the description of this video too. Watch A Clockwork Shining on Amazon Prime or on Vimeo. And we will see you guys next time. Have a good week, everyone.